Hi everyone, Igor from vinousreverie, the shop for the adventurous wine drinkers. We're coming here from Walnut Creek. We have a special guest today, Eric Danch from Danch and Granger Selections. And on this right here, waiting for us to go live. So he's going to be live on Instagram. So if you guys are watching us on Facebook, jump in onto our Instagram account and you can watch this conversation with Eric. It should be fun. And specifically one of the indigenous grapes to Tokai. All right.
Hey, Igor, how are you?
Hi. How are
Hi.
you?
Hi, Eric. Thanks for joining us. So I just had a quick introduction, but if you could kind of introduce yourself, and we'll go from that point.
Yeah, tell us how you got into wine and then a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you the abridged version. Basically, I was in restaurants for a while, and then I was in production for a spell. And then I lived in Europe for a couple of years. And when I came back, I actually joined a circus for about 6 years. And in the circus were a lot of Central Eastern Europe performers, because that's, during communism, that's a good way to get the hell out of those places and to travel. And anyway, with these performers, we would sit after the show under this big tent, and we would sit at a big king's table, and we'd eat and drink, and people would pull things out of their bags, So one of my first pairings was honey peppered Ukrainian vodka and whole pickled tomatoes,
That sounds
So, and people brought out wine. People bring spirits and wines from their home. That's what travels, and that's how they could enjoy themselves. And my heritage is from that part of the world, as well, and between Slovakia and Hungary. And when I left the circus, as one does, I was lucky to get introduced to a couple. Hungarian and a German, Frank and Zsuzsanna, who had started a company called Blue Danube, which was one of the pioneers of bringing in wines like this from all over Central Europe. And after 17 years, they were able to retire, and I kind of took the baton of sorts. So it's a different company than Blue Danube, but very much because of their tutelage and their investment in me. And now I have this small company with my partner, business partner, Catherine, and that's the Granger and Danch and Granger. And so our mission is kind of to, 30 some odd years after the fall of communism, or trying to find what embers are still over there and kind of bring them back and celebrate them here.
Okay, well, I gotta say, Eric, that's the best intro. We've had some great guests on the show, but that was the best intro so far.
Yeah.
Super.
I can send you some incriminating photos. Thankfully, most of my circuit years were pre kind of smartphone, so
I know. Goodness, right?
Hidden.
Yeah, I was taking notes. Restaurants, production, circus. So
Cool. So what are we having today?
We're delving into one of the very first places I ever went to. And actually, the first time I went to Tokai, which is the appellation in northeast Hungary, was I think in 2010, which is now, over a decade ago, which is kind of crazy. And this is, to Hungary, this is one of Hungary is the only nation in the world that sings about their national anthem, about wine in their national anthem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not like loosely, they speak about these wines, Tokai wines.
Okay.
It's literally, it's like the golden drips of the Tokai nectar, killing Turks, blah, blah, blah. That's most of the anthem.
Okay.
Well,
And
pull this map from your website. So we're talking Tokai right here, northeast.
yeah, it's the northeast corner as you get close to Ukraine, and actually part of the appellation is in modern day Slovakia.
Yeah.
And that's just because the borders have been a bit fluid over the past 100 years, one could argue.
Yeah. So, I'm actually from Ukraine. My background, so I was kind of surprised how I knew Tokai was in Hungary, but I didn't know how close to the Ukrainian border it actually was.
Right. In fact, I work with a producer in Barabash, and from her property, you're looking down into Ukraine. So those vineyards go right up to the border.
Carpathian Mountains should be in the vicinity, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit north. The Carpathians kind of hit their peak in Slovakia, and
Yeah.
then they kind of round up and over and down into Romania.
Yeah. And Tokaja is obviously famous for their dessert wines. In fact, like I think, like the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, everybody that was like the jewel of the wine world.
It was, I mean, it was, it is. Yeah, there's so much to say about it. I mean, it was it was medicine for popes.
Yeah.
It was a favorite of the czars. It was a muse for people like Goethe, Diderot, Voltaire, Franz Liszt, Balzac, Pablo Neruda. Bram Stoker apparently wrote Dracula completely sauced on Tokaj. There was actually a Swiss alchemist. I think his name was Paracelsus or Paracelsus,
Yeah.
who actually tried to extract gold from the liquid.
Another go.
It did not work. But yeah, Tokaj, I mean, what makes Tokaj special is, yes, it was the birthplace of Botrytis sweet wines, which is a noble rot that attacks the grapes and concentrates the sugars and leaches out the water. And these were the first, essentially, and I know you said dessert wines, but they're really the first naturally sweet wines.
Yeah.
And then the Germans figured it out with the Trockenbeerenauslese. Yeah. Obviously, the French were tired of buying Tokaj and figured out Sauterne. But this was a diplomatic tool. It was medicine. It was, this is what kings and queens and the aristocracy were drinking for hundreds of years. And these were Thomas Jefferson, who was quite a wine lover. The most money he ever spent on wine while president was Tokaj.
I didn't know that. That's very good.
He used to pour it to ply senators. And we actually have documents of that. These are all things that really happened. So, but what makes Tokaj special is that it's essentially 400 odd volcanoes.
Yes. With
a very amazing old growth forest to the north, which is also where all the barrels come from, which are also grown on volcanic soils, which makes them kind of rare and special. And then there's this two rivers, the Bodrog and the Tisza. And basically below that is the Great Plains of Hungary, the Alföld. And what makes Tokaj special is it's all about timing and place. They have late ripening grapes with thick skins that get healthy and ripe right as the moisture comes in and the Indian summer heat comes in. So botrytis, which is this noble rot, if it's not the right timing, it's called gray rot. And it is bad. It means you're not making wine that year. No one wants gray rot. But in Tokaj, it's a magical combination of climate, grape, and geography that allow it to happen year after year. But of course, the sweet wines are one element, but the sweet wines can take years to ferment and even more years to age. So what do you drink in the meantime? You drink dry wines just like anywhere else. And they've always had the dry wines. But quality dry wines didn't really surface commercially until about the early 2000s. I mean, we're only talking 30 years after communism, but to replant and grow things properly, retrain the wine industry, retrain the palates, retrain everything, 30 years is nothing in the ag calendar. It's like, that's basically 30 tries. It's not that much.
Well, did it have anything to do with the fact that Soviet Union, they had a sweet palate? They like the Georgian sweet wines versus the dry wines, which is the Western palate.
There was also the way the Soviets devised. I mean, this is oversimplifying it, but the Soviets are very careful to be like, you're a wine producing country for this. You build tractors, you produce corn, you do this. And Hungary was definitely given one of the jobs of you need to produce a lot of sweet wines and sweet sparkling wines and everything else. And so it was kind of a quantity over a quality situation. So you had these beautiful vineyards up on these volcanoes, as is Lonai from Kikelet here. But you couldn't farm those with giant Soviet tractors, and they wouldn't yield as much because they didn't have the same water retention, and they had different, the grapes they weren't yielding as high. So they started to plant everything very low on the flatlands. And then they were, just basically industrially farming to produce as much wine as possible at a relatively low quality for 50 years.
Yeah.
What Kikelet is doing and many others is they're replanting and restoring those hillside vineyards on the volcano, and then farming them organically, using native yeast for fermentation, using the best barrels from the forests above the appellation, and kind of reviving the best the best grapes. So and the irony is that Tokai was always a melting pot. Yeah. This was actually more densely populated and diverse than Budapest at its height. You've got synagogues, temples, churches, and one of the biggest Jewish populations was in Tokai. And they were extremely important in the making and sale of the wines. And of course, when the wall fell, the Berlin and the Iron Curtain fell, the rest of Europe knew what was there. So everyone rushed in. The Danish, the Brits, the Chinese, the French, the Spanish, they all rushed in. And one of them was a winery called Disnicu, which is French-owned. And a young Stephanie Beretz from Kikelet in her 20s took one of the jobs to move from the Loire and move to Tokai. And then, of course, she never left. And then she, I think in the early thousands, she met her husband, Zsolt, which is about as Hungarian a name as you can get. Yeah. And they raised a family there. Zsolt's family had a house in Tartsal, which is one of the 27 villages inside the Tokai appellation. Mm-hmm. And they have a 200-year-old cellar. And she's been kind of farming these, there's around almost 400 single vineyards in Tokai, many of which were classified as single sites about 150 years before Bordeaux. Wow. And arguably the first or second classified vineyards in the world of wine. Yeah. So it's like all these magical things exist in Tokai. They're just going to be kind of dust offed and figured out and redone. And Stephanie and Zsolt are, I think, at the forefront of doing that. Yeah. And especially with the grape called Hárslevelű, which is the name of the grape. So Kikelet is the name of the winery, which means spring. Yeah. Because I think that was one of the first words she could pronounce in Hungarian. Yeah. Hungarian is a ridiculous language. It's basically Finno-Ugric. So it's like Mongolians had sex with the Finnish and had a language.
I just know they have a lot of symbols over all of their letters. Yeah. So
it has no relation to Cyrillic, no relation to the Latin or Romantic languages. Nothing. It's its own. I mean, it's almost an alien language essentially.
Yes.
And then so Kikelet's the name of the winery, which means spring. And then Hárslevelű is the name of the grape, which is one of the 6 major grapes in the appellation. And then Lónai is the single vineyard. And the word after that, Dülő, essentially means single vineyard special site. So that's how you decipher the label, because there is a lot going on that people are going to be like, what is what?
I'm really glad that you pronounced all of those for us.
Yeah, and Hárslevelű means linden leaf. And I don't know if we have linden. We don't have much linden here, but in the Ukraine, there's linden trees everywhere. And they make honey from linden, or they make tea. It's kind of a limey, herbal honey quality. And that's typically a tasting note for Hárslevelű.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it tastes like.
I wrote down tasting notes. I wrote down honey, floral, peaches, green apple, because it has this limey but sweet kind of, flavor. It's funny.
It's what Stephanie calls sweet acidity, basically. It's not sweet with sugar, but there's just like a lot of energy in the acid and the fruit, and it really livens you up.
No, it's amazing.
Yes, it's really good.
Delicious, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, on 95 points, wine and spirits, in case people are really looking for the points. But yeah, very high score.
It is very high score. Yeah. It's a spectacular wine, and in the context of what I think majority of California drinkers know, which is California wines. This is a special wine, and there's nothing else like it. Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. It's a completely different taste profile from those
very
wines.
Unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's really enjoys like Chenin Blanc or Riesling, even if it doesn't taste like that, would definitely dig on this. But this is a great wine to like take to Tamales Bay and get some oysters and go to a wine like this would be amazing. And in Tokai, it's a white wine appellation in terms of what can be called Tokai. There are some red grapes kind of there, and maybe climate change. We'll see if those rules bend a little bit. But these are white wines you can have with, like, a very classic dish in Tokai is like a roasted goat, where you braise it until the meat's kind of falling off. Or like in Mexico, we'd have like a birria. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
And think about these wines as not just, appetizer wines or white wines you have before the red wines of the dinner. These can be entree wines. This and like a simple roast herb chicken can be amazing because the acid will cut right through the fat.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Well, that's such a cool overview of this wine. So it is delicious. We have a couple other wines for you. We're not tasting them, but I think it'd be great if you gave like a little bit of the overview. So maybe we'll start with the Hyman wines.
Yeah, sure.
I have.
This is from the south of Hungary, kind of south of Budapest, about halfway before you get to the Serbian border. And basically, these are two. Kek Frankos is the most planted red in Hungary. People might also know as Blaufränkisch in Austria or Lemberger in Germany. And then Kalarka is one of my favorite grapes in the whole Carpathian Basin. You can find it in Slovakia, Serbia, Romania, a little bit in Croatia, all throughout Hungary. It's like very thin-skinned, late ripening. If you're into like light reds, like Lagrein or Pinot or Gamay, it doesn't taste like that. But if you're into those kind of wines, you will dig on this. And it's the perfect pairing for anything with lots of paprika. And then Kek Frank, these are both 12 and a half alcohol reds. They're not huge, but they're aromatic.
Yes.
They're fresh, and the Kek Frankos can have a little bit more teeth to it, a little more tannin, a little more color, but still it's a 12.5% red that's ripe. It's not thin, it's just light. And it really works well with a lot of these kind of like spicier, fattier cuisines. It can hang out and takes a nice little chill as well. And the Hyman family has been kind of at the forefront of those two grapes for the past 25 years, trying to rediscover the lost clones, repropagate, figure out where these things used to go and how they used to be grown. So they're kind of an iconic family.
One question: what part of Hungary did you say it was in? Kind of on your
So if you look at Budapest, you take the Danube due south, and then on the western side, you'll see Sexard.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about Croatia, Serbia, close to that. Yeah. So Kek Frankos, Blaufränkisch, which is a grape I really like. It's in Austria, and Kadarka. I was definitely excited. And what's interesting, we mentioned that wine and spirits gave a really high score to the Kikale wine. And I know Jensen Robinson put it as wine of the week. Kadarka was the wine of the week. So in fact, a lot of the wines that I came across, the team from JensenRobinson.com, they reviewed them because in US, very little kind of mention of these wines. You guys are really pioneers in bringing these wines to the US.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. I think there's some others coming on board as well. There's some other competing importers, which I think is good. I think kind of in this category in particular, I think a rising tide floats all boats, and there's much more than I can bring in. But I mean, even the Tokai wine. This is a wine tradition that's got 500 years of history, but we don't know about it. You know what I mean? And Kadarka used to be the most widely planted red in the Hungarian kingdom. And at that time, the Hungarian kingdom was 70% larger than it is today.
Yeah.
And because it's thin-skinned and late ripening and actually needs a lot of work, it's really elegant and finesse. When the Soviets were trying to mass produce, they ripped almost completely out. It went from the most planted red to less than 1% of plantings by the late 80s. So these are, you guys supporting these kinds of wines actually Kadarka is probably one of the most being replanted grapes in Hungary right now for reds, because it's national pride in the best way, in the good way. There's plenty of bad national pride, but this is like reviving a really special grape, and the Hyman family has been influential. But there's a lot. I have a bit of a Kadarka issue. I think I'm up to like 7 now, so I'm a little obsessed. And even in Hungary, they're like, "What?" But I think if you see a Kadarka, and if it's from Dancing Ranger or if it's from somebody else, try it, because to get these wines here is a royal pain, and then to sell it is an even further pain. So if it actually ends up on a wine list or on a retail shelf, it probably is there for a good reason. It's not the easy sell. It's because there's a passion project that scaled all the way down to where you guys are.
Yeah, well, the theme of our show is for the adventurous wine drinker, and that's our shop motto as well. So.
Yes, yeah, and you know, I actually had a question for you exactly to what you're talking about. So, you're venturing Eastern European wines because you also you don't only do Hungary, you do other Eastern European countries as well.
Yeah, Hungary is kind of at the epicenter. It's where I started the exploring. But now we're in Romania, Serbia, Slovakia, Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, and parts of Austria as well. So yeah, it's a relatively big footprint, but we're really going after the native grapes, the more traditional styles, and then finding small family producers who are farming organically or biodynamically and making the wines with as little kind of fuss as possible.
And it's fun. So we have a couple of more wines from you. So here we have Ufark.
Yes.
So a little background about the region and the grape too. That'd be great.
Yeah, Ufark used to be planted all over the place as well. You would find Ufark in Transylvania. You would find Ufark up into Slovakia. You would find Ufark everywhere, but it really, for whatever reason, it survived and could not be get rid of on Szomlo. So Szomlo is the appellation. It's just literally, so if you look to the western part of Hungary, you see a large lake, Lake Balaton.
Yes.
It's actually a 50-mile long lake. They call it the Hungarian Sea, essentially. About an hour north of Lake Balaton is a standalone volcano, and it's like seeing Mount Diablo, to put it in Walnut Creek terms, from a distance. There's not much, and then Diablo pops up, or like Mount Hood or Shasta kind of idea. And basically, it's a standalone volcano, and vineyards were planted on 360 degrees of this volcano. Long extinct. It's mostly basalt, but the Hungarians call it the forgotten hat of God. It's like he just took off his top hat, left it, and walked away. And it's too steep to farm industrially. All the cellars are dug deep into the earth, and Ufark has just not. You can't scrub this thing away from this hill. So it's a very, very volcanic wine, kind of like the Kikelet.
Yeah.
But it's got a much more salty, funky vibe to it. And I know the bottle, the producer, looks like it's spelled Kolonix, but it is Kolonich, if you wanted the proper pronunciation. And if you're into volcanic wines, if you're drinking wines from Vesuvio or the Canary Islands or Santorini or Etna, those are all amazing places, but they're all Adriatic, Mediterranean. Yes. This is cool climate, hardy volcanic wine, and it's a beast, and I love it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because we've been doing the show, since the whole kind of shelter in place went in, and every week we chose a wine and discuss it. And man, volcanic soil wines are just home run every single time. I mean, these wines are spectacular.
Yeah, you can't really miss a Ufark in a lineup. It's not like you might not know what it is, but you definitely know it's not what you know. She's not a subtle creature, that grape, and I have that grape from a variety of producers. Yeah, and it is it needs to be tamed.
Well, it got just yesterday I had a positive feedback from one of the customers who tried it, and he was asking, do you have something else from a different producer? So I'm like, I have to look into that, because it definitely stood out. Yeah.
We just got in some Ufark from Slovakia, which is a whole different animal.
Okay.
And one of our producers in Transylvania is now replanting it because it was lost after phylloxera and everything else. So hopefully you'll be seeing more Ufark from different locales, although I don't think there's any in California or the States, to my knowledge. I'd love to be corrected.
And I think that the last one, if you could give this is the one I think if people know Hungarian wine, they'll know this grape, the Furman. Yeah.
Yeah, Fuhrman is the most planted grape in Tokai, and that's from the what they call the Old King's Vineyard, the Ura Kirari Dulu, and that is the steepest, most highly terraced vineyard in Tokai, and it's been planted since 1285.
You can tell it has a symbol of the terraces on the bottle.
Yeah, and on the neck, you can see the terraces as well. They're quite proud of it, as they should be. So this first planted in 1285, at least we know that from its written documents. This was owned by royalty, and it was so steep, so gnarly, so impossible to farm other than just getting people in there by hand. It went entirely fallow during the communist years. Literally, the forest was starting to take it over. And Barta, that winery basically completely re-cleared the forest, dug out the terraces, and found the right material and replanted it. And they've been farming organically since the get-go. So this area has never seen chemical farming ever.
Yeah.
And it's so steep. When you climb up, it's like 45-degree angle, and then you're out looking at all these little volcanic peaks. And the wine, that's a 2015. And just hitting its stride now.
Yeah, yes, and well, apart from the course, Justice Robinson he gave it 18 points, which is like equivalent to 95 points that we were talking about for Kikale one, which is a spectacular score. And yeah, the one question I had, I think that's the only one you had from them, but it sounds like they make quite a few fascinating cuvées. Yeah.
Yeah, we were actually supposed to visit them in April of 2020, and that didn't go as planned. So actually, I have a whole bunch of samples I'm actually tasting next week from them. So hopefully we'll work some more out from them. It's been obviously a very weird year as an importer.
Right.
You don't have your normal travel. You don't have your normal kind of happenstance encounters. It's not business as usual. So yes, but that's a very special wine. That's like that's their top crew. It's super ageable, and again, no one knows what these aged wines are like because the oldest ones go back to 2000. So that wine's a bit of a creature that I think is pretty, shows some good promise. And anyone who's more like richer style Chenin Blancs or Rieslings, like a Mont Louis style from the Loire, or even a Vouvray, it's like that with just salt and acid on top of it.
I mean, Riesling and Chenin Blanc is like our favorite wines. You throw in like a Syrtikos, and you got the trifecta. So maybe this is going to be the fourth one on the Mount Rushmore of white wines. Yeah.
Yeah, Ferment is definitely, and Ferment's not as aromatic and as kind of elegant as the Harsh Levelou.
Yeah.
But with age, that acid just drives it forward, and it gets golden and alive, and it's special.
Well, we're definitely excited, and thank you for bringing in these wines. This is just apart from the course what we do, and yeah, this is definitely a hand sell. But I think people once they experience it, I think they're the winners. In tasting something great.
And I think
go ahead.
I think also, like, especially when we're all in this lockdown period, having wines that can do a little bit of armchair traveling, think about somewhere else, put on some traditional Hungarian music or Romanian chardash or something, and make a local dish, and just kind of like break the damn routine of the same takeout, the same dishes you always make, the same go-to wines you always grab at the market, and use wines like this as just a brief moment of something different, and not to replace what you love, but to actually, I think when you drink wines like this, it reminds you why your favorite Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Noir or Zinfandel or whatever it might be is special, because they are so, whenever I go to a restaurant, I end up ordering Zinfandel Chardonnay, or because these countries cannot produce those kinds of things, So it just widens your whole spectrum, I think, on wine, which is the idea, and you'll never get to the bottom of it either.
Well, you never know. It might be your new favorite.
I mean, from a business perspective, I would like it to be your new favorite. But that's not necessarily trying to usurp anything. It's just trying to widen the.
You live once, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Okay. So the one thing I just want to mention, on your website, Danch and Granger Selections, you guys you write your newsletters, and I think they're a lot of fun. So if people want to jump on and read your newsletter, maybe sign up for your newsletters, I think it's a lot of fun, and you go into a lot of explanation about behind these wines, and I think it's a great way to intrigue people to try them.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I learned in the circus days, which is like once you built context around a wine, like once you heard someone tell you this crazy story about this place and what happened there and the history, all of a sudden the wine tastes a lot better.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and you can, if you're into the winemaking, our website and tech sheets, you can go into, you know, soil pH and all that. You can go down that route and figure it out.
Yeah.
But I really want people just to kind of have more of a storytelling basis. Maybe learn something historically that kind of connects, expand the geography, make you cook something. And essentially what I want the wines to do is I want the wines to inspire people to want to actually travel these places.
Well,
I know it's far now, but it should be possible at some point.
Well, like I think you said, you know, storytelling, because I think you mentioned on your website, you know, Flaubert and Dostoevsky, some of the best storytellers ever were drinking Tocado. Yeah. They weren't drinking the buttery California Chardonnay as far as, you know, as I know.
So aspiring writers should, you know, really take heed, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you want you need these days, you know, put on some Franz Liszt, who also drank what is supposedly an absurd amount of Tokaj, and also he also loved Kadarka. So put on the Hungarian Rhapsodies, make some stuffed peppers or some chicken paprikash, and, you know, drink some of these wines and just have a little outing for yourself.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, thank you, Eric, for joining us. This was such a fun conversation, and you know, I really learned a lot from it. So.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Have a nice day.
I'll see you in person at some point. We'll see.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was great talking with you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Goodbye.